Welcome to the Enchanted Earth Podcast, where you will hear stories of nature with the power to transform our lives. These sacred stories are begging to be shared now. So listen in as my guest today shares one of their own. Welcome, everybody, and today we have with us Luisa Carell. Luisa is a global passion ambassador and host of Passion Harvest, interviewing thought leaders across the globe who explore the boundaries of consciousness, going behind the veil, offering insights that encourage self-awakening and to remember the truth of who we really are. Luisa lives and works from an intuitive realm where she can see into future memories and connects to the dimensions of the soul. She shares this with her coaching clients in her Mystical Mastery program, designed to fast-track your growth and allow you to recognize your divine soul-aligned path. Luisa works on the premise that passion and freedom are our birthright, and obstacles can be seen as growth. Moving through challenges are life lessons, a story creating framework of your divine spiritual essence. Welcome today, Luisa.
Oh, what a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. And I'm honored to be on the show today. So and hello to the audience. So thank you very much.
There's a lot of parallels between your kind of calling and mine. And I love that you kind of talk about story and creating framework. So yeah, I mean, that is my intention with this podcast, looking at our stories connected to the natural world and how those stories can really inform who we really are in an authentic level.
I mean, nature's an incredible thing. I live in I don't know if you can tell by my accent, but I'm originally Australian and I live in the south of France in the countryside on a big property. Nature's an incredible thing. And I was just thinking before our interview today, you know, it's healing. It doesn't judge. It's always there for you. It doesn't answer back. It's silent, but offers healing and insights, much like life. Gosh, there's been so many instances that I can talk about nature and elementals. And I was thinking about, one of the memories. I'm terrible with memory, but when I was probably in my teens, I truanted school. I skipped school a lot because I was unhappy. And in those days, if you're old enough to be watching this podcast, we didn't have mobile phones or iPads. And it amazed me for a whole term of school, a whole semester. I didn't go home because my mother worked from home and she'd be angry with me. So I went to a local park and went in Australia, we call it the bush or the forest, and sat on this massive sandstone rock. And I sat there for hours and I always took a pen and a paper and I'd write stories and do drawings. And in some way, it was my best friend. It didn't judge me. It didn't say, "What are you doing?" It felt comfortable. I wasn't afraid. I was in my school uniform and I guess I hid in the forest or the woods because I was in my school uniform and people would think I truanted school. But it just offered me a secure safety and a place that I would call home, a second home. And I guess that, is one of my beginnings with nature. And another, I can tell you so many stories, but, many years ago, before I started Passion Harvest, I was in a corporate role. I was in a very unhappy marriage and I have two beautiful older children now. And from what looked from the outside was perfect, beautiful house and career. But I was desperately unhappy. I was so detached from my intuition and my awareness and nature. I lived in a city. And I started to change. I think I don't listen to her anymore. I think she's wonderful, but Abraham Hicks. And what I really got from her is that we create our reality. And I thought, well, if I've got into this reality, I can get out of it. And I thought, well, how am I going to do that? And the other premise that she installed in me is get happy, whatever it is. Find joy, find happiness in each moment. And I started to change. I think I remembered more of myself. And so every lunch at my corporate office, I'd go across the road to this little park in the middle of the city, probably like Hyde Park, but a lot smaller. And I'd kick off my high heels, and I started to meditate at that stage. And I was so worried at that time what people thought of me. I'd close my eyes and meditate, but pretend I was looking at the sun. So they would just think the sun was in my eyes, and they wouldn't think I was weird. And one day I realized that this was the happiest time of my day. And I usually sat under this beautiful big gum tree, which is a very typical Australian tree. And there was a gum leaf on the ground. And I thought, I'm going to take this back just to remind me in my office of my moments of joy, of my connection with stillness and silence and peace and acceptance. And I took it back to my office and hid it behind the computer monitor. Again, worrying what people would think. So uncorporate. And the universe has a funny way of pushing you, kicking and screaming if you don't align with your heart. And several months later, I was retrenched from the role and packed up my office, and I realized there was really nothing there, perhaps one little memory stick USB, and I packed up the monitor, which wasn't mine, it was part of the company, and I saw that gum leaf. Several months later, it had died and it had shriveled up. And I just received this message, or just this knowing that if I had stayed in this life, in this reality, I would end up like that dead, shriveled gum leaf. Perhaps in a beautiful, what we perceive as a beautiful corporate office. But a part of me would have died. And so I was terrified to leave my corporate role, having no idea what I was going to do. And I remember opening the beautiful big doors that day, and my hand was shaky, and I said, I wanted this, but I'm terrified. And I made a promise to myself that day that from that day on, whatever I was going to do it with passion. And that's how Passion Harvest started.
What a beautiful name for the work that you do, Passion Harvest. It's so earthy and joyful, and there's so much energy, positive energy that comes from those words.
Yeah, another incredible story, and nature is a big part for me. Just before my marriage ended, I would have these reoccurring dreams, and I had it for 6 months, unwanted, but it was one of, those dreams that are so real. And it would take, I don't dream that much. I don't remember my dreams like a lot of people do, but it took me there every night. And I saw this beautiful expanse of virgin forest. And on the top of a cliff was a woman in a cage. She was naked. I don't know how long she'd been there, perhaps 20 years. Each time I went, I never saw her. She always had her back to me, and I'd call out to her saying, I don't want this dream, and how can I help you? Let's work this out. Why am I having this experience? And some nights when I was sleeping, I'd just go there and I'd see her putting her hands out to gather rainwater. I'd see her, because the cage was small, I'd see her, she was aching and weary because she couldn't stand upright in the cage, so she'd put her legs out through the bars just to stretch out. And some days it was almost as if she was going crazy, and she'd bang her hands on the bars and they'd start bleeding. And another time I saw her digging under the dirt and her nails ripped out trying to escape. And it almost became unbearable. It makes me emotional thinking about it because it was so real and so connected to me. And the last night it happened, and when my life really changed, and again, the juxtaposition of this woman in the cage and this beautiful, virgin, incredible forest as far as the eye could see. I called out to her and I said, let me help you. And the woman turned around and it was me. And I saw around her neck was a key on a chain, and it was the key to the cage. And I realized that I'd been so afraid. I mean, it was so heart-wrenching. I'd been so afraid. We can be so afraid of so many. I was afraid of getting divorced. I was afraid of being a single mother, of separating, of being poor, of what's outside the cage. And to cut a long story short, I encouraged her to open the cage, and we jumped off the cliff together in this beautiful forest. And it changed my life. You know, we can be so held back by fear. Of course, fear comes up for me, but it doesn't move me like it used to. It doesn't hold me in that cage. And I guess this perhaps is a message for people that are watching or listening, that we hold our own key to our freedom. This is one of my biggest soul lessons. We talk about soul path or soul lessons, is freedom. Freedom's really important to me. And I sometimes often find myself trapped but in different scenarios. But and I thought to myself, is there someone that just makes keys to our cage, to keys to the human heart? It's us.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so that's another experience with nature, the juxtaposition of being in a cage and jumping off the cliff.
Wow. What a profound gift you received during a very pointed time in your life.
It was brutal, but
Yes, absolutely. But what strikes me too, because I'm a big dreamer, and I started on my dreaming journey right around the time when I was also laid off from my corporate job. But one thing that strikes me about your series of dreams is the fact that you were lucid enough to be able to talk to this woman. Like, you had some consciousness during the dream.
yes, but
That
she
I
never
don't want to
talked
have
me.
this dream anymore. So
No,
you,
she never, me,
yes,
an
right.
element of me, never spoke.
Right, right. But at least you had the consciousness that I don't want to have this dream yet again. Oh my gosh, why am I in this dream? Rather than being completely unconscious and just experiencing the dream, there was consciousness within you within the dream.
That's a good point. I haven't thought about.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, that is a huge awakening when we can actually be in our dreams in a more lucid state. And it is something that I've had occasionally, but it is certainly not my my regular mode of being in dreams. So that's really, really awesome. But
Thank you. I thought I'd never lucid dream, but clearly I have. Now
Oh.
that you talk about it, I have had another lucid dream. Thank you.
Yeah, and they are such gifts to us in our spiritual growth, in our personal growth and self-discovery. But what also hit me in hearing your dream was a lot of times. Now, I know we both know Connie Kaplan because we've both
She's
interviewed her.
amazing.
And one of the things that is really important to look at is more of the collective symbolism. Our dreams definitely, I feel, have a lot of personal symbolism, and yes, but also to look at them from a more collective level. And I was seeing like Mother Earth in that cage, in our beautiful world, but the wasteland is really holding her in this cage. And we have the keys to let her out, to really reclaim that divine feminine within us. And all of us have that key to let her out.
Yes. Maureen, you're so insightful. Thank you.
Wow. Well, I
This
just
is like a therapy session for me.
I just I had a dream on the very night that I was laid off from my corporate job. And I was also really struggling with working there and feeling kind of dead inside. And when I was laid off, yes, you think that you're going to be, oh, this is great. Yes, this is what I wanted. But there's a part of us that, the fear takes over. So I was really questioning, what am I going to do now? And that very night I had a dream. And in there was the symbolism of a deer. And I was recognizing that when we connect to nature, feel more joy and love. And it was a revelation to me that day that this was my path, but it wasn't clear what I needed to do, and it took me several years to get there. But yes, our dreams can have such a profound message of our calling and where we need to go.
Yes, and I guess, gosh, that was a while ago, but since that time, as I said, it just released so much fear, and it doesn't necessarily move me so much anymore. And of course, our life is filled with conflicts and contrast. But what I've realized more and more through suffering is if we can put a positive meaning on our reality, it's kind of like these lifelines. But this life is, Luisa, the awareness that I'm talking to you now, it's short. I think I've learned more and more from that experience is to honor and value myself. And I had this realization the other day, and it could be related to nature or ancestral lineage or family. We are so unique and so special. If only we could realize that and honor ourselves as an integral part of Gaia, Mother Earth, of nature, of the collective consciousness. It's also about self-worth and self-honoring ourselves and loving ourselves, which is a very, very hard job, the constant work.
Absolutely. And, I'm constantly reminded that our lack of inner honoring is just a mirror reflection of how we're treating the planet.
Yes, well, that's a macro perspective, but I also look about, everything in our conscious reality is a reflection of us. Whatever happens, whatever experiences is a reflection of what's going on in our internal landscape. Our external landscape is a reflection of what happens within. That is tough sometimes. Yes, I mean, I had an experience a while ago with a romance, and I'm just giving you an example. And I thought, how could he treat me like that? I thought I loved myself and I was worthy. But again, if you look at it as a mirror, as a reflection, I kind of received the answer, but how could I treat myself like that? How could I disrespect myself? So it was a reflection of what was going on internally.
It's an onion, many, many layers.
Oh gosh, I know. This earth, human incarnation is tough, hey? They call it a school. Yeah, and also, I mean, I work on the premise that we do create our reality, so I take full responsibility, not always pleasant, but full responsibility for my experiences and who I am. If I want to become a better version, and I have a list of and I need to do it through my heart of how I want to feel, how I want to act, and how I want to be. I do it now. But just say, for example, this Luisa, which I don't, I'm giving you an example, eats cakes all the time. The other reality, the parallel reality of Luisa, if I become that version, I don't even need to give up cakes because I just don't do it. It's not something I need to give up. It's not something I need to give away. It's just not who I am. And that can relate to any habit or anything. So we're slipping in and out of parallel realities, and it's so subtle all the time, we just don't notice it. And the way to align with the highest probabilities to stay in a positive frame of mind, whatever happens.
Oh, yeah. That really strikes a chord in me,
Yes.
especially right now in the U.S. And the world is the world is feeling our pain as well. Yeah, it's I am seeing how we're really being asked to step up, to practice what we preach, those of us who have been working on ourselves to really reflect on this and how we're going to move forward. Um, and the word that keeps coming to me is the word resilience.
Yes, it's not. Yes, I agree. It's a conflicting time, but it's not about fighting. It's more about surrendering. You can either be right or give up your freedom. You have two options. It's not about reacting to it. It's not necessarily meaning it's okay, but it's about not reacting to it. I talk about, as in reality transurfing, I talk about pendulums. You know, the pendulums?
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a pendulum, a political party, a thought that keeps reoccurring. You can't fight it. It's like looking in the mirror, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If you look in the mirror and you start fighting your reflection, it's going to fight you back.
Mm-hmm.
If you smile at your reflection, it's going to smile back at you. The key is to remain as neutral as possible. But it doesn't mean you don't care,
Mm-hmm.
but not to react to it, because then
Right.
it builds up a negative flow of energy.
Yes. Oh, definitely. In that energy field, it's just feeding it. I guess I'm looking at resilience as being able to come back to that center and just being centered, being grounded, and not being knocked over. I think a lot of people, and it's being knocked off center. It's very triggering for a lot of people. And I see resilience as kind of the opposite of being triggered.
Yes, but once you're aware of a habit or a way of thinking or a belief, then basically it's only a choice. I know
Yes.
that sounds simple, but it's just a choice.
No, I know. And some of the most impactful teachings and wisdom that we have is it is so simple, yet it is so hard. It's just the opposites, right?
Yes,
Um,
everything radiates from the heart. And when you can align that, because the mind usually goes crazy and overtakes, but when you can align the mind and the heart, that's when the magic happens. I often like to ask myself the question, who am I? Where am I? And where am I going? Just to really ground everything.
yes, those are really good questions. Yes. So I'm kind of curious. You were born in Australia
Hmm.
and you wound up in the countryside in France.
Yes.
I would love to understand your connection to that landscape and what really attracted you, from a more, I guess, really like earthy landscape
Ah,
perspective.
yes, yes. You know, people often ask me, you just packed up your life and moved, but it was almost, you know, the heart and the mind. I didn't have a choice. I mean, it's beautiful country. It's basically like the rolling hills of England, but it's more charming and warmer. um, it just called me. You know, I came here in just when COVID was finishing in 2021, and I just felt that I was being called to it. And I wanted to find a home, a house to buy. And I didn't know how I was going to do it. My French is terrible, by the way, but I get by. um, what I did every day when I was staying at a friend's house, and it was just this innate, it's like, you know, when you fall in love, you just know, you can't even explain it. I fell in love with this region at the time. It's like love. You can't order it like pizza. It just, unfortunately, it doesn't happen. And I had the opportunity to do it, but I didn't know I was looking for the right house, the right place. And so I was here for 3 months before I had to return to Australia. And then I was planned to come back if I'd found a home. So every day I went for a long walk and I sang a song to the land and to the trees. somewhere along the lines of Find Me My Home. And I've got the worst singing voice in the world, so I won't even sing it for you. It was a short song and I'd sing it and it would make me feel good. And as I sang the song, I imagined, as I was singing to the trees and singing to the land, the interwoven connection of the elementals of nature was almost going underground like a spider web, feeling out what was meant for my heart, what was meant for me, finding my home for the perfect price, for the perfect location. And singing this song every day for 3 months, I found it. And people often say to me, how did you find this incredible place? And I say, well, I don't think I found it. I think it found me. And before I left Australia, there was a bit of a blockage, and I went to the Botanical Gardens in Sydney, which is a massive park, and I was meeting someone, and I was early. I'm meeting a friend for lunch, and I sat under this tree, and the most incredible thing happened to me. In my mind's eye, I saw this old man. He almost moved like a monkey, quickly, and he was a tree spirit. And he came down and looked at me and said, "What are you doing here?" And I said words to the effect that I'm just sitting waiting for my friend. But it was just the most incredible. I'm not crazy, but it was so real and so incredible. And he said, "But you haven't connected with your home of your birth to ask for permission to leave." And in some way, we had this telepathic communication. He wasn't a monkey. I'm just giving the analogy of what we know in our human terms. He was an old man, a guardian of the tree. He looked at my hair and he walked around me and he couldn't believe that I could actually see him. So he was quite delighted. And I said, "Well, how do I ask permission to leave?" And he said, "But if you ask for permission, you may not come back." And I said, "That's okay. I feel my heart is ready. I know this is the home of my birth and I love this country, but my heart desires to do this." And he said, "Okay, it's done."
Wow.
It was an incredible experience.
There are so many different ways that nature connects to us, and actually seeing the spirit of the tree and having a dialogue. That's just so beautiful.
It was so real. It was I didn't see it with my physical eyes, but undoubtedly. I've never seen one since, but it was undoubtedly a spirit of a man, an older man, a spirit of the tree. It was incredible. When I go back, I should go and visit there.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Check in with that tree.
Yes.
I'm curious, was there any part of you that felt unsure or reluctant?
Not for a second. Sometimes now I do miss it. I don't know what I'm going to be doing for the next 5 years. It's familiar. I don't need to use maps or anything, and everyone speaks English. That's so much easier. Calling up even the electricity company. At that time, no, there was no doubt. It was just a knowing. I just wanted to do it. I divorced for many years. My children were older. They were at university, and I had the opportunity to do it. And I thought, well, even if it doesn't work out, that's okay. I don't want to be on my deathbed one day and say, "I wish I'd tried it. I wish I'd just tried," because I don't want regrets. And where I'm is beautiful. I'm on, I don't know what you talk, I'm on 40 acres, 11 hectares. And I've got a beautiful Labrador that's snoring somewhere in the background.
Yes, we saw him earlier.
Oh, and we walk in the forest for hours every day. And with my garden, I prune all the trees as well. There's only one tree that has beautiful flowers that doesn't like being picked. I picked it once and it was very unhappy, so I stopped.
Yeah, we could definitely feel the energy when we're approaching nature or the world with an open heart, we can definitely feel.
Well, yes. I mean, there's so much out there in consciousness. Everything is energy. It's like, I had this. I was awake. I had this visualization the other day about consciousness, and it was like there's walls. I'm in a room. On my monitor's in front of you, but everything was almost like plasma. And if I could push it to the left, it would be the past. If I could push it to the right, it would be the future. Everything's already there.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's happening right now from my experience.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think it really resonates with me and many people, but it's definitely a concept that's hard to understand.
Of course, unless you experience it. People like to, it's like reading about love. You can't know what love's like unless you experience it and feel it.
Right. Yeah.
It's
Talking about our interaction with nature spirit and with the natural world, I know that you're open to sharing about your dialogue with the tree and seeing this being that personified the tree, that was the essence of the tree. But you and I talk about this, but so many people won't share their experiences at that, though they may have had them.
It's like when I first started my podcast, I was so scared to push the upload button because I thought, oh my God, my family, my friends are going to think I'm so friggin' weird. But I've talked about so many things on Passion Harvest, my own experiences as well. It doesn't really bother me anymore. So I've had many, many experiences, not all the time. I mean, I'm a normal person, like we all are. Well, what's normal, but I've had many experiences, particularly with dragons.
Ooh, I think you need to tell me about the dragons.
Well, I guess I can start with the first one and maybe go, there's been many in between. The dragons, we have this mythology of dragons that they're dangerous creatures. I call dragons, one could term them the angels of the earth.
Mm.
And from my experience, they're childlike, they're beautiful. They're almost like my beautiful Labrador puppy, but in giant form. My first experience with dragons wasn't asked or perhaps wanted, but never thought of. One night I went to sleep and I couldn't sleep. And I had this experience all night. I was awake. And the energy was incredible. And I had this experience that I traveled down into the center of the earth. It was like someone was calling me. It's a bit like, if you're in the house and your child's calling you from outside, you go outside. I was just there in my consciousness. It was the most real experience ever. And I walked in, it was a while ago, but I kind of walked into this cave, and out from further down the cave, out came this massive head, a giant head. And I looked at it. I wasn't afraid at all. It was still, but it wasn't silent. It was dark, but it was light. It was nothing but everything. And this massive dragon head looked at me. And it gave me the most beautiful smile I'd ever experienced. It was like pure love. And it was almost that I was being reunited with a child. I felt like its mother. And it telepathically communicated that it was injured and it needed help. And it explained to me the role of the dragons. And they're noted by Rory Duff, who's been on my show. I love Rory Duff, who talks about ley lines and dragon lines. Mm-hmm. The dragon lines are the biggest. Dragon lines, one could imagine they circle underneath the earth to elevate consciousness, to elevate broken parts of consciousness of the earth. Yes. And it explained to me that its tail had been injured. And I said, well, I almost saw it like, if you imagine a flag and it's kind of ripped and it's flapping because it keeps going around. And I mentioned before, like when you throw a dog a ball, it loves its job. It's excited to do its job. Its purpose. It's filled with energy, but such unconditional love and kindness. And it is in what we call Earth, just a different dimension of reality. And I walked towards the back. It's huge. It was huge. I walked towards the back of its tail and I started sewing it up. And sewing it and sewing it. And I knew it wasn't a long-term solution. But of course, the sewing wasn't hurting it. So if you imagine energy, you're sewing through energy like this. And even brushing beside it, it was so big, but so gentle. And it felt like, not God, but it just felt like, a father or a child, an adult man a boy that you haven't seen for so long, just that warmth. And I just knew we'd met before and it had called on me to help them and I was honored to help them. And then it showed me it was quite happy to continue the rotation of the earth now that it was sewed partially. I'm very good at geographical location or remote viewing. So I can go into houses. I mean, I've had past lives with this, but go into houses and look from like an X-ray for energies. And I asked if I come in the future, how can I find your geographical location, your home point? So it continues to circle. And it told me it was in, I don't know, I mean, this is bizarre, in Cologne in Germany. So I did some research. And there's a massive dragon line that runs from the big cathedral in Cologne. And funny enough, it runs straight down my property and over to Spain. What are the odds of, yes.
That is so amazing.
This is before I moved here and I found out when I did some research with Rory Duff, who's mapped I think there's 3 dragon. It runs through my property and out through Spain.
Wow. Oh,
because I'm kind of, if you look at charts or the Mary
Yes.
Magdalene line, I'm
Yes.
kind of on that, and then it goes over to Spain.
What a story. I am so glad I asked you. I'm a dowser and I do work with, I'm
Oh.
also a feng shui practitioner. So dragon lines is from a Chinese folklore about the dragons in the earth, the dragon veins, they call it. And from the Eastern perspective, dragons are very benevolent, and you need to honor them and respect them. And I do feel like they are, an intrinsic part of the earth.
Very much so.
So the fact that you had this, was this a dream or?
No, I was awake. And again, I said I was up all night. It was like I hadn't had a drink of alcohol. I wasn't on drugs, but I got up in the morning. It was like I was so energized. It was just like this euphoric, intense experience, which has only really ever happened that once. I mean, I've had beautiful experiences with dragons since then, but that first one, it's almost like I merged with the energy frequency of it circling the earth. I became part of it. Wow. And it was like these massive, if you imagine a train going through a massive tunnel, it was like that.
What was going on in your life at that time? Like what stage were you in your kind of awakening process?
Well, I think that was after I'd left my corporate role and I just knew there was more than, going to work, and I felt that I was much more than just a physical body having dinner parties and, taking the kids to school, which was all wonderful. And I really felt that I was just more. There was something more. And I started doing some research on these people and how did they connect with the spirit realms and dimensions, and was there an afterlife, and near-death experiences. And I thought, well, oh my God, I want to learn all this too. And I thought, well, I don't have the time to read all the books. There's so many books. So what I'll do is I'll interview incredible thought leaders across the world. I'll learn and I get to share it with other people. So that's kind of how it started. And I think every interview I do, it's an activation, not only for me, but for the audience in some way, some word, some sentence. Even if it helps one person, then my job's done. And dragons are very good for healing pain and suffering. More recently, it happens sometimes that when I'm sitting in this chair sometimes on my computer, dragons, without a doubt, not that often, but every month, couple of months or so, dragons are flying above the house. Big, they're beautiful, and they have this dialogue with me. But the last time it happened, just before I had this incredible experience with parallel worlds, it was so compelling and so real for me. And I went outside and I sat down and I was asking them questions, and they were flying circles. They're massive above my head. I wasn't afraid. I was just interested, like, why are they connecting with me? And we had this whole dialogue, but to cut a long story short, they said, when you suffer, we suffer, and we want you to come home. And I said, well, what is home? And they explained to me about parallel worlds. So we inhibit infinite probability of parallel worlds in different forms. And when I'm conscious as Luisa, my form, my fractal of my soul, is sleeping in that other world. And there is really no time there, so time doesn't really matter. So I could live a lifetime, it would only be 5 minutes there. And I said, how long have I been sleeping? And they said, many deaths, many moons, and many, many seasons. And we want you to come home. And I said, but who am I? And then I was shown this vision of this older woman, a dragon, in a cave, asleep, and they were worried about her and couldn't wake her. And because when one sleeps for so long, the physical form can become damaged. And this massive dragon, it was like a big boy, and again, it was the sun, the one I had seen in the beginning. And there was just this connection. I almost felt like there was a beautiful cord of connection from me to this massive dragon. And it was like a jet fighter flying over my head. And if there was wind, I'd be almost blown away. And he started saying these words of, Mama, come home. Mama, come home. And it was the most beautiful experience. And I realized that in some reality, not necessarily I'm their mother, but maybe a mother figure. It was beautiful. And through that cave, they showed me how to access my portal, which, was very interesting. It's like they gave me a key to the secret door.
Right. So your ability, so you have that ability now to be able to go visit and go home.
Yes. One of my homes, yes.
Right.
Perhaps many lifetimes of knowing, a soul connection, a soul family. So in some conscious dimension, they're my soul family, and I do have a home there. And I kind of miss it sometimes. It's just knowing that there's another family besides the one I have in this reality, and whether I'm aware of it, not always, they can contact me, perhaps like lost loved ones in our physical form. They're always there if you're open to it. You're never alone.
Yeah, the dragon energy. Yeah, there's something about that because perhaps it was because we were talking today, but I looked up the other day and in the sky, I just saw this dragon spinal column. It was literally like the head and the whole spine of the dragon and the tail in the clouds. I felt strong dragon energy around us. So maybe they were just preparing me.
Yes, they're beautiful. Well, or connect with you. They're beautiful. They're sweet. They're giant. It's kind of like a friendly lion. Let's imagine it that way. But they, again, I feel I would call them the angels of the earth, and they breathe fire to cleanse.
Yeah.
They're here to assist humanity.
Yeah. Such beautiful stories. I am just so glad that we were able to connect, and I have found you and your beautiful work with Passion Harvest and your podcast. And your website is simply passionharvest.com, correct?
Yes.
Wonderful. And I'll put all the information below for Luisa so you can connect with her and her work. And as we wrap up, is there anything else that wants to be said?
Okay. Everyone, I'm not special. Everyone has this ability. It's like being childlike and playing, really, and trusting and believing yourself, whether you wish to or have a desire to connect with nature or elementals or loved ones that have passed or transitioned, the non-physical dimensions. They're always there, and they're always trying to contact you and connect with you. If you allow yourself to be open and still and believe in silly little symbols or synchronicities, and the more you are open to that, the more you take note of that, the more it comes. What's that saying? Wherever your focus energy flows. And I guess I'd like to say on a final note, which is what I try and live by most of the time, is when in doubt, or generally in your daily life, ask yourself the question, what would love do?
Such beautiful words. Thank you so much for coming on with me today, Luisa.
Oh, my pleasure. And I love what you're doing. And thank you so, so much. And thank you to the audience. And yes, thank you very much. Bye, Maureen.
Okay. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Please comment and share and subscribe if you enjoyed this.
Subscribe to her channel.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Comment below, share, and most of all, please hit the subscribe button so that you'll hear when we publish another inspiring episode. You can visit us at luminous-spaces.com for more information on our online courses, retreats, and offerings. Thank you and have a magical day.